Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Knife Chats with Tobias. Okay, welcome back to part 2 of Ugly Knives. Now, in the first episode, I was talking about knives that I found ugly. In this episode, it's going to be knives that I own that other people have informed me are ugly. So these are knives that I actually like the way they look, but other people have told me those are kind of ugly. Kind of like what I said about the Mora knives. And one of the things that repeatedly showed up in the comments when I was talking about the Mora knives was numerous people saying, yeah, but they work great. And I never denied that. I think they are excellent knives for what they are. You're seeing 3 of them here, and the one I showed to begin with is probably the most attractive of the 4 I own. There's another one I own buried somewhere in a tackle box or a backpack or somewhere. I assume that it will probably show up right after I get this video all shot, edited, and up and online. I was never commenting about how well a Mora knife works. They are excellent knives if you know what you're doing with them, or how can I put this? They're great knives, especially at the price that you're paying for them. You cannot go wrong with a Mora knife, but they're not necessarily going to be visually appealing to everybody. Like I said, this is probably the most appealing of the ones I have. There was a reason why when SMKW during National Knife Week was doing a raffle, I did not enter every raffle that was going on. I entered raffles for knives that I was interested in winning. And so I would not have entered the raffle for this knife if I was not interested in winning, winning the knife. Because I figured it should go to somebody who is actually interested in the knife. I saw this one. It looked interesting. I would not say it's a beauty contest winner by any stretch of the imagination. Like I mentioned, I like the scabbard a little better than I did the knife, actually. And it is just a hard plastic scabbard, so nothing fantastic about it. I think the only real fault I have with this knife is right here, where the blade enters into the handle. If you notice, you've got a sharp edge coming all the way back to here, and nothing is to protect your hand from going up on there. And what it looks like Mora did is they have a handle, a wooden handle, and it's like, well, we'll just use this handle for multiple knives. And I don't think it was the best handle for this knife. That would probably be my only negative about this knife, other than it's not the most attractive knife in the world. I would have rather seen a nice guard and everything else. But I have a feeling that this knife will end up in the kitchen, just like another one of my Mora knives that I forgot to mention last time, because it's in my kitchen drawer. Stand up, little Skip. Stop drinking. And that is this one, which is really a big knife. Really big knife. And I have it in my kitchen because I use it as a butcher knife. And it's a really good knife for that. If you see there, it's basically an 8-inch long butcher knife. And if you see the tip there, the way the tip is ground, see that? That is really good for getting into the knife or into the meat and everything. So you can actually make nice, small, tight incisions there. Yeah, if you're going to do that, you're going to be up on the blade like so doing it. Not something I would normally do, but it's just a really good cutter for the kitchen. But to say it's attractive is a stretch of the imagination in my mind. I just don't find it an extremely attractive knife. But for the feel in the hand and the ability to get up on the blade and everything else, it's a pretty good knife. So I like it for that reason. But this is not a knife I would normally just routinely go out and say, oh, that looks like a great, beautiful knife, and I'm going to buy it. And the fact that you have a sheath for it makes it really handy. And this, allows you to attach it to something. So if you're going camping or something, or if you're just going out for a cookout or something like that, and you want a knife for the grill by the cookout, by your barbecue or by your smoker, this would be a terrific knife for it. Is it going to ooh and ah people with its looks? I doubt it. I think it would just kind of sit there and be completely unnoticed. But if someone were to grab it and start using it and cutting with it, then they would be impressed with it. So that's what I'm talking about. I don't find the knives visually appealing. So hence the word ugly, something that isn't visually appealing. Now, there's the other ugly too, where you're talking about ugly to the bone. So it has actually, it's just morally reprehensible and something that has no redeeming social value or no redeeming value in life at all. That is a different kind of ugly, and I would never say that about a Mora knife. This one is a hacking blade, so this is for scraping away old putty and scraping around around windows and stuff. Got a good handle for it. This is the same handle that I think you have on the basic 511, which is really good if it's a handle that you've used before. And I do like this kind of handle on a Mora knife more than just the solid black. I mentioned that before, that solid black rubber handles are not something that appeal to me. Probably one of the reasons why I never really got into cold steel knives, because what you have is a bright shiny blade and a black rubber handle, and it's just not something that appeals to me. Other people love it. So that's what I want to say about that. So remember that when I'm saying ugly, it isn't that anything is wrong with the way the knife performs or anything else. It's just that visually the knife did not appeal to me. I could say the same thing about trappers and several other traditional patterns. It's a pattern that doesn't visually appeal to me. That doesn't mean it's a bad knife. Mora would be out of business if it was a bad knife. Trappers would not be one of the most collected traditional pattern knives out there if it were a bad knife. But just because it's a great knife, just because everyone else likes it, doesn't mean it's going to visually appeal to me. And as I've mentioned many a times, I think, especially when it comes to collecting, one of the things that really does spark the interest first is the knife visually appealing? And so let's move on to the next step, before we move on to the next step, let me visit, I think, what Knife Detector really meant when he was talking about looking for ugly knives. And that was the last one I showed, which was this fish knife that I showed, that I put some really nasty looking handles on and everything else. So this is what I think he was talking about more when he was talking about an ugly knife, because it's a knife that's in bad condition or bad shape, but you still feel like it's worth rescuing. And that's what I thought with this knife when I first got it. It was in horrid shape, but I still wanted to rescue it. And it still functions fine, but to say that it looks great or looks brand new or anything like that would be really a stretch of the imagination to say anything positive about the way the knife looks. But it still has a certain appeal to me because, there's the shape, the way it feels in the hand. And that's, I think, what happens with a lot of the Mora knives. Once a person gets it in the hand and they use it and everything else, slowly the knife becomes more appealing. Simply because, visually appealing, simply because now that you've used it for a while and you really like the way it works when you're cutting or the way it feels in your hand when you're cutting and everything, suddenly what was ugly becomes much more interesting because, you're more familiar with it. So And the same thing happens in the opposite range. Sometimes you'll have a great looking knife, but then you hold it for a while, you use it or something, and suddenly it's like, this just doesn't work for me. Time to pick on my Tops Wolf Pup, the XL. This is a knife that I really love the way it looks, but if you can tell, I've hardly cut anything with it. And the main reason is this bump right here. When I put this knife in my hand and I want to use it, the finger groove is just in the wrong place. It just does not feel good in my hand. I'm sure other people probably have a larger hand and this knife feels great in it. But because this bump is right there, I just don't like the way it feels. So I have other Ulu Skinners. This is a pattern I really like to use. It's really great for chopping and dicing and cutting and everything. But because of the way that bump hits and also the way the ramp is here, it just doesn't feel comfortable in my hand. So the knife doesn't get used a lot. I look at it and it's kind of a knife of regret. I wish I would have bought the regular size Wolf Pup, which was a much smaller knife. It would have probably felt better in my hand. Now getting a Wolf Pup is pretty difficult to do. So I'm stuck with this, and I don't know, do I want to keep it? Do I want to sell it? What do I want to do with it? I don't know. So this almost has become a knife of regret simply because of a bump there. Or maybe what I want to do is just file that down and see how it goes from there. But if I file it down, I don't know if it's going to catch in the sheath correctly. So anyway, so there you go. And that's, I'm sure a lot of people are looking at that going, that's a great looking knife. And I think it is also a great looking knife. So it's got the outer beauty, but effectively it's not as fun to use. So which would I rather have? A more enjoyable knife to use or a knife that looks good? When it comes down to using a knife, you kind of want one that feels good in the hand. This one does not feel good in the hand, the Mora does. So that's where inner beauty shines through on the Mora. Back to another ugly knife I got here, and this is more in line with what Knife Detector was talking about. I think this was fall into his category of an ugly knife that you really like. This knife is I have repaired it a little bit. I've made it feel a little bit better. I made it function a little bit better than when I first got it. But you can see that it is an older knife. This is one from around probably the 1930s or maybe as late as the 1950s. I don't know. But the whole reason I wanted it is right there, the standard Scout shield. That is really the one bright shining light on this knife that I really like, and I wish the rest of the knife could live up to the shield. The handles are a celluloid handle. You see that they are bent a little bit. They have definitely gassed out. I'll show you how I know they gassed out in just a minute. The stainless steel bolsters, or they might have been nickel silver. In any case, they're definitely scratched up. You can definitely see the pin there. You can see the gapping going on there. You got the brass liners going there. I have shined them, but they've already dulled again. You see a little bit of pitting on the back springs there. The tools, they work okay. All of them function fairly well now. You also see there's a lot of patina and rust going on along the top of the blades, but the inside seems to be a lot better. And that's because these knives, this particular knife, was stored quite well. Notice where the line is of the staining, and notice how clean it is underneath there. That's because the celluloid covers gassed out on the knife, and so you got a lot of pitting going on along the top there. And here we have the punch. The punch is in pretty decent shape, but it's got a lot of rust going on in there, and it's got to really get cleaned out better. And you see some serious rust going on right there, again, right along where all the gassing was going on and everything. And then you got the main blade here, and that's probably the weakest part of this whole knife. You can see the patina and everything else. There was a lot of rust up there that I had to get off. There's some actual pitting going on along the top right here, almost enough to make a swedge. How much pitting is going on around the top here, especially back here. That's not rust anymore. That's just pitting on the blade. And you can also see the blade has been reprofiled. So either the tip got broke or whatever. Somehow or another, it has definitely been shortened and reprofiled, and it was not reprofiled very nicely. I really don't like how they reprofiled it. But finding these knives with this Standard Scout shield in a price range that I'm willing to pay is pretty hard. So I should just be thankful for right here, Fred Greenhalgh. This was his knife, I guess, unless Fred Greenhalgh was a company or something that had their name slapped on it. Any case, I think that's more the ugly knives that were rescued that I think Knife Detector was talking more about. So these two knives kind of go together. And definitely this one's a better looking ugly knife than this one. But let's talk about some other ugly knives that I own that I think look great, but other people have said are ugly. And we'll start with the Spydercos. I mean, this is the Para 3. Come on. And a lot of people say they're ugly knives. I was one of them until I got a Dragonfly. Then I got a Dragonfly and fell in love with the Dragonfly. I went and picked up a Para 3. I was looking at the Para 2, but I grabbed the Para 3 instead because I found that this size was a much better size for me. I do like the lock. A lot of people say it won't work very well with a left-handed person, but once you move this over to the other side, I flipped the wire clip. Something else, even Spyderco fans, a lot of Spyderco fans hate the wire clip. I love the wire clip. And a lot of people just don't like a hole in the blade, but I was one of them. I did not like the idea of that big old hole in the blade. I thought it would mess with the integrity of the blade and everything else. But then I got a hold of a Dragonfly, and I even batoned purposely trying to hit right on the hole there, and had no issues with it at all. And I just love the size of the Dragonfly. This one glows in the dark, so there's another plus for me. A lot of people don't like knives that glow in the dark too. They think glow in the dark knives are ugly. I like glow in the dark knives, so this one has everything going against it for a lot of people. They don't like the hole in the blade. They don't like the shape of it. They think it looks goofy and everything else. They don't like the wire clip. They don't like that the wire clip can only be in one or two places. Everything about the Dragonfly I love. This is one of my favorite knives to carry, a Dragonfly. And when I first saw Dragonflies or Spydercos in general, I looked at them and I thought, man, those are some very funky, odd-looking knives. They were a little bit on the intriguing side, but when I looked at the price, they weren't intriguing enough to buy. But somehow I ended up breaking down, buying a Spyderco, and falling in love with them. And now, to me, the Dragonfly is a true thing of beauty. Everything about the Dragonfly I really like. The Para 3, I really like it a lot, but not as much as a Dragonfly. I like that you can flick it and all that other stuff. But I'm also not a big fan of modern folders. You all know that pretty well. And a lot of people say, these are the entry drug when it comes to modern folders. I don't think I'll be going any further, but man, the Dragonfly, I just really love it. But many of people have told me that they're just ugly, they're too small, they look funky, don't want a blade with a hole in it, you know, boring, because it doesn't have the super fast flicking or anything else, because it's just a mid-lock back with a dent in it and everything else. So a lot of people have criticized the Dragonfly. Some people right to my face saying that looked like a goofy knife. Well, it might be goofy to you, but man, I love the Dragonfly. So there's my first knife in the entry. Actually, the whole family of Spyderco knives. So many people say they're ugly or have some other negative connotation to describe a Spyderco knife. So, but to me, simply because of the Dragonfly, I think mini Spydercos are just a beautiful work of art, beautiful functional piece of art. And maybe that's what people think of with the Mora too. Who knows? But for me, mine is the Spyderco. I just love the Spyderco Dragonfly. Who can forget the saw cut turd? Yeah, a lot of people laughed about it and everything else, but there are other people who really like this. There's a reason it's been around for a long time. They especially love the old USA version of this. They think the coloration is a little bit better and everything else. And I do admit that the USA versions of this bone or this saw cut Delrin look better than this shade of brown here, and it definitely seems to age better than this one. But we're not talking about this one now. We're going to talk about a type of handle material that I really like, and I've had numerous people tell me absolutely sucks. They just don't like it at all. And that is this, the cracked ice or the imitation pearl. So we're talking about the celluloid that is supposed to look like pearl, often called cracked ice. And this is one of my favorite celluloid type handles, cracked ice. But other people say they just don't like it. Now, well, when you put it on a stiletto like this, that to me is almost iconic when you have a cracked ice stiletto. It's like something that you would see in the old movies and everything else. The imitation pearl stiletto. Obviously, an actual pearl stiletto would be even cooler, but the cracked ice stiletto is like the you can see the sharks and the jets with the cracked ice stiletto. So that is one of those things that has always appealed to me, cracked ice. And admittedly, different companies do it better than other companies, but it really doesn't matter to me. I really like cracked ice. And I know a lot of other people really don't like cracked ice. They just think it looks cheap and phony and everything else. But for me, that's actually part of the appeal. I don't know why, but I really like cracked ice. It's one of the few swirly plastics that I really dig. Another one that I really dig is tortoiseshell. I've had numerous people tell me they can't stand tortoiseshell, especially, well, the imitation tortoiseshell. But to me, it's just iconic, and I really dig it. So I really like the tortoiseshell. And as long as we're doing it, yeah, I've had negative comments about the Stoneworks lineup of knives. Not so much recently, but in the past, numerous people would tell me that they just could not get behind this because it just looked cheap and gaudy. And to me, it's anything but. But the thing is I'm not going to sit there and argue with a person or try and tell them how they're wrong with that, because yeah, I can see how somebody might look at that and say, "Man, that's just way over the top. It's kind of gaudy and everything else." I've said the same thing about like reverse frosted blade etches and things of that nature. That this knife would be so much better without the blade etch and stuff like that. So I can get it. I can understand how everything, when it comes to visual appeal, there's going to be differences. So what I like in a knife is not what everyone else is going to like in a knife. So that's 100% okay with me. So when somebody says that they don't like it, to me, when I'm doing a review, like when I do the review of the Stoneworks knives, if somebody says I don't like the stones on that or something like that, to me that's perfect. My review did what it was supposed to do. I pointed out something about the knife. The person looked at it, and they determined that it's not something they liked. There's nothing wrong with that. Matter of fact, that's the whole purpose of doing a knife review as opposed to trying to do a sales pitch. So when I'm talking about the Stoneworks knives, you already know because I bought the entire series. I bought every Stoneworks knife that has come out, I've bought. That must mean that I must really like those knives, right? Why would I buy them if I don't like them? But when I do the review of the knife, if I'm doing it right and I'm pointing out what's good and bad about the knife, and if one of those things is you just don't find the knife visually appealing, why should I be hurt about that? To me, that's part of what I should be doing in the review. I should let you see what the knife looks like, and you can determine if that's a factor that's going to say, no, I'm not buying that knife. I do not like the way it looks. Same thing with the Mora knives. Somebody can show me a Mora knife and say, look at what this knife can do. And they go out there and they chop everything up and everything else. And I go, well, I've got other knives that can do the same thing and they look better, so I'm not going to buy the Mora knife. There's nothing wrong with that because at least they showed me what the knife can do. I don't think anyone has ever shown a Mora knife and said, look at how great this knife looks. That's not been the sales pitch for it. Any case, let's move on. Got a couple more knives I want to show you that people have told me are just downright ugly. And in some cases, I have to agree with them. But, that's the beauty of the knife is it's downright ugly. Here's one of my downright ugly knives. This is an old World War I marlin spike knife. This would have been a British Army knife for World War I. It was actually made by Camillus, so it might have been serving with the Commonwealth forces. And you can see this thing. This is not what you would call an attractive knife. Even if this knife were brand new, spanking clean, and everything nice and shiny on it, with the copper bale and the bone was brand new. There was no spacing going on with it or anything else. This would still be an ugly monster of a knife. But that is the beauty of the marlin spike knives. They look like tanks and they look like they can just take on the world. And that's what I really like about them. These are, what could you say? These are man's knife. This thing is a brute of a knife. And it's just how brutal it looks is what makes it beautiful. So this was never designed to be a beauty contest winner, but it becomes a beauty contest winner simply because of pure brute force and just how ornery it looks, I guess. It's a really cool looking knife. So that is a different aspect of beauty in a knife. Sometimes they are so damn ugly that they're just beautiful. And here's another marlin spike knife that a lot of people just think, man, that is weird looking. And it is weird looking. It looks like a fish. See the jaws up front there? Looks like some kind of weird Amazonian fish. And it's got this thing there's your marlin spike. You open it up. It's got a funky curve to it, but it works really well. Got a liner lock there holding it open. And you got the pliers there, so it's pretty cool. And then the blade just looks funky. And they call this a sheep's head blade. Meyerton called this a sheep's head blade. Why? Because it's not a sheep foot blade. And a lot of people just don't like any blade that's serrated. But this knife is just a terrific rope cutter and everything else. Not a big long blade, but long enough to do what it's supposed to do, which is cut line. So, again, not going to win a beauty contest, but for me, this knife is just absolutely beautiful. I love the whale on it. I got all three versions of it, the red, the silver, and the blue. I like how it feels in my hand. I like how it cuts. It's just a really cool knife to me. But yeah, it's not going to win a beauty contest, I know that, but it's still a beautiful knife for me. And here's just another hard-working knife that I thought for the longest time was, yeah, well, it's kind of boring and bland and somewhat even ugly. You know, the TL29s. These are not knives that are going to win any beauty contest, let's face it. But if you use them and if you hold them in your hands and if you know, at that point, you know, it's just a really good functional knife. And it does what it's supposed to do. And once you use it for a while and start doing stuff with it, suddenly the looks of it disappear and it just becomes, once again, a thing of beauty. I like what blade locks, what blade doesn't lock. I've seen people actually sharpen this blade so that it's actually a pointy blade and everything else. But you can actually sharpen along parts of this. Actually, usually part of it is sharpened, so you can do some cutting. You've got this part here for wire stripping. This divot here, there's only one purpose for that divot, and that is so you can get to the nail nick easier on the main blade. And you got a spear point blade. A lot of people are like, spear point blades are just a boring blade. Boring, but really, really functional. These are some of the most functional blades you're going to find. So, yeah, once you get them and you start using them and you suddenly, and you know the history of the pattern and everything, suddenly the knife becomes a whole lot more cooler, a lot more interesting, and a lot more fun to collect, and also more of a thing of beauty than it was before. All right, the next knife is very similar to the scout knife or the camp knife. And I actually have more of them than I do scout knives. And that is the knife that I have been told is ugly, boring, bland, out of date, and just mundane, and way too red. And that is the Swiss Army knife. And they lump them all together. They don't care. Victorinox, Wenger, it doesn't matter. They just lump them all together, and Swiss Army knives are boring. They're ugly. They never change. They all look alike. I think anyone who collects Swiss Army knives has heard everything negative you can ever hear about a knife. From people who probably have never actually owned one, knows nothing about them or anything else. Yeah, the majority of them are red. However, some of them are quite colorful too, especially when you start getting into the newer ones. The early ones were definitely, well, actually the earlier ones were kind of a brown. And they were made out of fiber and stuff like that. It was a while before they ended up getting into the red plastic, and then it was a darker red plastic, then it was a lighter red plastic, and you went from a type of cellulose to the Celadora, and now they're using, what is that? There's an ABM plastic or something that a lot of them are being made out of now too, so all of that has changed. And while both of these are Spartans, there are so many differences between these two knives. But for the non-Swiss Army person, they're all just boring, bland red knives. So, and if you collect them, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Everyone who has these knives has been told at some time that it's just a boring knife, really. But if you collect them, you know they are far from boring. There are so many varieties that you can't count them all. Yeah, there are slight differences year to year on the way the tools look and everything else. But that's part of the interesting thing with the Swiss Army knives. So, as a collector and as a user of Swiss Army knives, these are some of the most fascinating knives that are out there as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, I collect them. The ones I like to collect most often are the Spartans, but I also carry them, and there's a couple that I really like to carry. And well, let's just show you just how wrong you are when you're saying they all look alike. And I'll break out just red ones. So we'll start with the little one here, 58 millimeters long. Notice the difference in size. Definitely not the same as this knife. Just because they're both red doesn't mean they're the same. And, well, you got the different blades here. You see that. But the cool thing about this one is this is not the classic SD. This is actually a whistle. This is the 58 millimeter whistle knife by Victorinox. Yeah, a whistle knife, you know, and I like whistles, so that's a pretty cool knife right there. And that's not your typical Swiss Army knife that everyone talks about. Let's move some stuff back here. Put you up there. Can we see you? Here we go. How about another one? 84 millimeters. We're starting at the small, working our way up. So 91 millimeter versus 84 millimeters, a little shorter. Now this one, you know, you got the front tools and then you got the main blade there. And then this one is an older one, so it's got a clip blade. You got the corkscrew on the back, and you also have the quarter round punch going on there, which is really a cool thing. And if you noticed, yeah, it has an actual bail. It doesn't have the key ring. This is a more modern one, 84 millimeters. You got the combo tool, which is different than the, here we go, then the can opener. See the difference? This acts as a can opener. It also acts as a cap lifter. You got the wire stripper there. Oh, and somebody said that this doesn't work very well as a for screwing in screws. It'll work pretty good for a number 2 Phillips screw. You can actually screw straight down. Hold on just a second. Okay, bring this back a little bit. Man, I got a bunch of junk here. Now, there is a gap there, if you notice there. I will say right away, this is not going to work if you're going to try and drill straight into a piece of wood with a brass wood screw just using this. But if you've got a gap there or a hole, you see it does fit. It will actually go in. It doesn't fit perfectly, but it fits well enough that you can get a purchase and you can turn. When you want to get into it more tightly, that's when you got to turn like so, which is very annoying, as somebody pointed out. So it's not the best. Swiss Army Grizz is right. Petey Grizz, he is right. This is not the best screw to use. But that is also why they don't list this as a number 2 Phillips screwdriver. But in an emergency, if you need one, it'll work. Especially with number 2 screws. It will turn it, but not as easily as you wish. Because if we take and use the other screwdriver, you'll see how much better this fits and actually turns. So this, and they don't even list this, now they just call it a small flat screwdriver, but as you can tell, it will work to screw in Phillips screwdrivers or screws. This will work much better than this will. But if you need to get something loose, this will work. Just not fun. And I think that's what Petey Grizz was mentioning. It's just not fun. You can do it, but it's not your best choice. Let's move back on to, and that's one of the reasons why I like these knives. There are so many things you can do with them. Some of them are great, some of them are a little bit more gimmick, but it's just fun to know what you can do with the knife. Could you imagine trying to do the Phillips screwdriver with this blade tip? Would that be nearly as safe? And how screwed up is your blade tip going to get? So there you go. I would much rather possibly sacrifice this tip working to get a Phillips out than screwing up my blade tip. Oh, and this is the Walker. So besides that and this main blade, you got one of the best wood saws you're ever going to find on a small knife. The wood saws on Victorinox knives are fantastic, and I would much rather saw a piece of wood with the saw on a Victorinox knife, and then baton through using one of your survival knives. Moving on, we got the 84 millimeter Cadet and the 93 millimeter Pioneer, and these are in red A-locks. So yeah, boring I guess, but red A-locks. One of the things that people complain about this is that once you use it for a while, the red starts wearing off and everything. All I think that does is add more character to the knife as that red anodization wears off on these knives. It just looks beautiful. These are in pristine condition. The Pioneer, the 93 millimeter knives versus the 91 millimeter knives, one of the big things about them is you got a blade stock that's a little thicker, and you've got a blade that is just a little bit longer, so it's a much cooler knife. Oh, wait, wrong one. Can't expect everything to be perfect. There you go. Blade stock is a little bit thicker, and it's just a more sturdy knife. They used to actually call it the Sturdy Boy because it had a better blade on it. And this became the standard issue knives for the Swiss Army knives, or the Swiss soldiers. They use this basic same knife as the Swiss soldier's knife. Speaking of Swiss soldier's knives, we'll move on out of the way for a minute. This is the original Swiss soldier's knives. These are the true Swiss Army knives. These are the ones that were issued knives to the Swiss soldiers. This particular one says Elschener Schweiz, and it's from 1944, so this was made back around the time of World War II. If you remember, Switzerland was neutral, so they did not participate in the war, but they still had a standing army ready. Got a flathead screwdriver there, a monster of a can opener to open, and then the quarter round awl. Really cool knife blade there. Hear that snap? That really locks in place. And you see there the Waffen mark. That shows that it was an issue knife for the Swiss Army. So another knife size out there. I think this is 100 millimeter. I think is it. Yeah, that's one of their 100 millimeter knives. So moving on, we got the 108 millimeter lineup of knives. These are discontinued. This is the Safari Hunter. You got the corkscrew on the back, and you got a punch on the back. Come on, where's the other side? Just a nice long punch, or awl, whichever you want to call it, sharpened there. And then this one has 3 blades. It's very similar to the German Army knife in that it's got the saw blade here with the combination tool at the end. So you've got the screwdriver and the cap lifter and the wood saw. And then you've got the main spear blade on the far side. And then down the middle, though, you have a gutting blade. Big old long gutting blade. So you've got the blunt tip here, and that would work really good. It became the what do they call it? A seatbelt cutting blade. So it's also a safety blade there, so you can cut seatbelts and everything. And if you notice the very tip, can you see right there how it comes around the edge there? It is not sharp right there. It gets sharp right about there. After you make the turn, it starts getting sharp. But up at the beginning of the tip, nothing is sharp. So you're seeing here, there's quite a bit of variety in even the red Victorinox knives. This is the Outrider. I'm not going to go through all the blades on there, but among things that you'll find on it, besides the wood saw and the scissors here, you also have a #1 Phillips screwdriver on the back. And it's mounted so that you can easily screw down in there. And you also have the other, got to close this first. Watch this, watch how fast that closes. Boom, it's gone. And if you need the #2 screwdriver, you got it up front. #2 Phillips screwdriver right there. So that's the Outrider. Really good knife. This is the one that usually goes with me whenever I'm out in the woods. This is a terrific knife, and got a nice long spear blade. You've got the old slide lock going on there. Most of them have a liner lock now. I've got one of the older ones with the slide lock. I love the slide lock on these knives. So there's a lot going on with these knives. And then finally, the Folding Hunter by Victorinox in red A-locks. Got a nice fob going on there, lock back, beautiful blade, just a terrific knife, and very stylish. And very functional. So you can see there's a lot of Swiss Army knives out there, and there's a lot of variety in the pattern. I guess I am trying to sell you on this now, but really what I'm trying to do is debunk the myth that they're all the same, they all look alike, and they're boring and they have no function. So many people just think they're worthless, and it's because, well, so many people want that flipper knife with the one blade, and they'll do everything with the one blade. Victorinox knows that that's probably not the best way to treat your blade. Use your knife blade as a knife blade. Use other tools for their general purpose. Now, yeah, I will be the first to say that if I'm going to be doing a bunch of Phillips screws, I'm not going to be using this all day long. Why would I? I would grab a proper screwdriver. But at the same time, if I was going to be doing a bunch of Phillips screws all day long, I wouldn't want to use the tip of my knife either. So it's what you can use for that quick fix or something like that. And nothing beats a Swiss Army knife for a quick fix. And I'm going to move little Skip out of the way here so he doesn't get hurt, because I'm going to push these all back, because I got one more ugly knife I want to show. And I think this knife is ugly, but its appearance has grown on me over time, and that is the ASEC. It has the big, nasty black rubber handle. I do not like big, nasty black rubber handles. It's all blacked out. I'm not crazy about all blacked out. This one has a green nylon sheath. I much prefer a leather sheath to green nylon. I mean, let's face it. Which sheath looks better? Really, which sheath looks better? But which sheath will get mounted on your gear better? This one will. Which sheath will last longer in combat? This one will, with its heavy plastic insert there, the nylon cover. You got the molly sheath or molly strap going on the back. You can actually slip something through there, but you could also hook your belt, hook this to a belt anywhere along the molly strap here. You can also just thread it into your flight vest. So this was actually designed with purpose in mind, and it's a much more functional sheath than this one, which was tied into everything. And you could fit it on a web belt, but not really easily or well. This blade and this knife looks so much nicer than this knife. No doubt about it. It looks nicer. But is it more functional? This one, the handle, the reason they got the overmolded rubberized handle is you get a better grip. It's not going to rot. And it provides a little bit of practice when you're cutting electrical wires and stuff. You still have a pommel here that you can hammer with, same as what you got here, but actually you've got more surface to, once you get this into the sheath, you can actually swing down and hammer. You got more area here for pounding on. And you also have the back here, which is supposed to be used for breaking glass and stuff. So you've got the tip there for breaking glass, which is really helpful. You do have the saw here. And by the way, this saw, it will work pretty good on wood. Not as good as your Victorinox wood saw, but it will cut through wood. I have tested it. It does better than many people think. And you also have a serrated edge here. So you have a serrated edge here. A lot of people hate it because it has a serrated edge, but the serrated edge means that you're not going to have to sharpen it as often, and it will still be able to cut through numerous things. Remember, this is the idea of this is to actually cut through everything from plexiglass to the aluminum siding on a aircraft. You've got a very good tip for punching holes. This is just a swedge. It is not sharpened. This is sharpened on top. The problem they had with it is this tip is not as sturdy as this tip. This tip is will puncture better than this tip will. So functionality wise, this knife is going to serve you better than this knife. But no doubt about it, you know which one looks cooler. Everyone knows which one looks cooler. This one is just, there's really no other way around it. It looks awkward. The blade looks too small for the handle. You've got the hole there, which I guess is good, but if you want a lanyard, it'd be a good thing for the lanyard. It'd also be good for strapping your knife down to a spear. And yeah, these knives were actually designed to be made into a spear. They actually say that in the paperwork for the Army that the knife was designed to be used as a spear. They have two holes up here. They have hole and hole here. I don't know why they moved the holes like that, but I do tell you that this knife indexes better in the hand than this knife does, because this one is round. You can get it offline a lot easier than you can this one. This one indexes in the hand better. It's got the good palm swell going, and it feels good in the hand. Doesn't look nearly as good, but it has its own sexiness to it, I guess. Any case, there you go. Beautiful knives, ugly knives. Truly, it's all in the eye of the beholder. I think every knife I've shown today, including the Moras, are really functional knives. Some of them really appeal to me. I really like the way they look, but I get it if somebody else doesn't like the way they look. That's okay by me. And that's the great thing. That's really what makes the entire knife community go around, is that we all like different knives, and we all find different knives visually appealing and other knives not so visually appealing. All right, I think I've rambled enough and preached enough and also ranted enough, especially about Victorinox Swiss Army knives. But with that said, I will let you go. Let me take just a second to thank you once again for dropping by and spending a few minutes here at Knife Chats with Tobias. I really do appreciate it, and I do appreciate any comments that you leave. So please remember to give me that thumbs up, and also don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll know when the next episode is up and running. thanks again for dropping by. Really do appreciate your time here.